What's up, everybody? My name is Dean Chessman, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made this video by adding depth using an AI tool called Video Depth Anything, and also how I turned it into this dynamic 3D point cloud and 3D line system. I show it both in the current version of TouchDesigner using tops and sops and shops, and then also using the new experimental version of TouchDesigner that uses pops. Uh, I hope you enjoy it. And just another note, real quick, I am a freelance TouchDesigner developer. So if you have a project that you're interested in hiring somebody for, or if you just need help on a project, I'm definitely for hire. So definitely reach out using my contact information below. Thanks so much. First thing I'm actually going to do is bring in my browser because for this project, I'm going to be bringing in a video and creating depth from AI. And to keep things extra simple for you, I'm going to be using this project here called Video Depth Anything. You can, if you know how to set up a project on your own machine with Hugging Face, or if you go to their GitHub page, which is also linked here, and you want to install it yourself, you can do that. But to keep things simple, you can actually also just run through their demo page here on the Hugging Face website, as long as the length of your clip is less than 1,000 frames. So I brought in this video from pexels.com, and I brought it in and I set some settings here. So I set the mass process time to 1,000 frames, even though it's only 7 seconds, so I definitely didn't need that much time. I changed the target frame rate per second to 30 frames per second. The default is set to 15, so you probably do want to change this. I also set the max resolution for our side to 1920 so that I get the full resolution of it, and or at least I guess a full 1080 resolution. And then I also set this to grayscale uh, because I want all the depth information to be in one single channel. If you don't do this, then it'll separate the grayscale into I think it's called a plasma coloring, and it looks cool, but it doesn't give you as good of results as far as like the actual depth map video goes. So I have now those files downloaded, and so I'm going to bring them into my project here. Um, so I've got a viz file and a source file. And an important note here is that you're going to want to make sure you bring in the clip that was processed. So like back on this website, you want to download this one and this one because they'll be set to the exact same length, and it'll just make it a little easier on you to like make sure they're synced together. And then also speaking of syncing, not that this will be that big of a problem, but I'm going to show it just to, in case you run into this issue. So right now these are both playing like sequential mode, but I want to make sure they're always locked together so that as I'm playing around with it, um, if I like swap out video files or something like that, they might get out of sync, and I don't want that to happen. Especially if this is something where if you're going to download this project file at the end and try it out. That they're always being synced. So I'm going to change the play mode of this second one here to, instead of sequential, I'm going to say time code object locked. And then I'm going to bring in a time code chop. And I'm actually going to set this time code chop to be to reference an operator. And so this chop is going to be referencing this video. And then this video is going to be referencing this chop. Okay, so it goes in this time code object here. So now if I cue the beginning of this video, it also stays in sync with my second video here, right? So now anytime I switch these video files out, no matter what, they're going to stick to the same frames. Okay, so now that I've got that out of the way, I'm going to add a couple nulls here also just to help for when if we swap out videos in the future. So I'm going to call this one depth, and I'm going to create a null here and call this one video. Great. Okay, so to sort of first make my sort of point cloud effect from this, what I need to do is I need to figure out where my points are gonna live in space. So I do have sort of my Z depth in this video, but I need to generate my X and Y positions. So the way I'm going to do that is just to create a kind of simple basic UV map. I do that usually through my GSL. Hopefully this doesn't intimidate any of you away because it does involve editing some code, but it's not really that code based. So what I do is in the GLSL, you'll see there's this vuv.st, and I copy that and I paste it down here. And then I'm going to put 0 in here right now just to show you what this looks like, but then I'm going to edit something in a second. So this creates for me a 0 to 1 in the X and a 0 to 1 in the Y, which is going to match my X and Y positions. This DUV variable here is just storing the UV data coming in, and it's just taking that stored data and exporting it out directly with a number from 0 to 1. So it's normalized 0 to 1 X, Y, 0 to 1 are going in the X direction and in the Y direction. So this would also be the same if I did vuv.rg, and that's kind of close to what I'm actually doing here. I'm doing red and green values in my image, or even the same thing as doing .xy. Those are all equivalent in this situation. Let's say keep it as RG, because this is actually in this 4-unit vector. It's going to make the 2 units for this RG. This is going to be the blue value right now, which is 0, and then the alpha value is 1. And for the blue value, I wanted a blue value to be actually what this incoming depth is. So I'm going to uncomment what this line here is. What this line is doing is it's taking an incoming, like one of the inputs. So this is input 0, which is just this top input, and doing a lookup based on the UV value. So just the exact XY value is pretty much coming straight in, and setting a value to that. So I'm going to call this instead of color. I don't want it to both be called, these both to be called color. This I'm going to set D for depth. And then for my color, that's going to be the thing that I output. I'm going to do D dot R, because it's my red value that's in this depth channel. If I normalize all my channels here, if I A and N to see this view, you'll see I've got the values in all of these channels. So even if I did, D dot B uh, in this situation, it would work fine. But I'm going to put it back to R just in case, it might make sense to change these to like a mono value or something for efficiency, because I don't need all these channels to have all those values. So, okay, so now we see if I do the same thing here, if I hit A and then N to show my normalized value in each of my channels. On my red channel, I've got my X values, my green channel is my Y values, my blue channel is my depth values or my Z values. So another way we can look at this instead of the normalized look is if I bring this into a null here, I can also hit A and then V, and it views it as points. So you'll see I've got X and Y values and Z depth values coming out. So it's all stored just in this image data. Every single pixel on this is representing a single point on here. And you'll notice these values right now, because the UV values are normalized from 0 to 1, are too wide, right? Like if I render this out, it would look really stretched. So I want to go ahead and fix that. That's just adapting to whatever the aspect ratio is. I'm going to assume I'm going to keep in my system, I'll just always have Y go 0 to 1, and then I'll adjust this sort of the width in the red value. So if I insert here a math, I can rearrange in the range tab of the math my reds. Instead of going just from 0 to 1, I wanted to go from 0 to whatever the aspect ratio is of this. And I'm going to use the input actually to tell me what that aspect ratio is going to be, because it's what what I'm bringing in. I want to adjust to that. So me.inputs 0. So that's like just saying from this operator, the 0th, so the first input, I want to take the height, and I want to divide by that me.inputs 0 dot width. Okay, so that's going to be sorry, it's width over height that I want, not height over width. So width over height, because I want that 9/16 ratio. Okay, so you'll see now it looks like the uh, correct positions on all my points. Okay, so I'm going to rename this actually to POS for positions, and I can hit A and V to turn off that point view if I want. And then let's see. So yeah, let's go ahead and just render these out as points just to see what that looks like. So we're going to create the sort of classic point cloud renderer here using an add and a convert. So an add stop, I'm going to say add a point, and then I'm going to convert that point from a convert to a particle per point. And I'm gonna click and drag out from my convert, and then while I'm still holding it, I'm gonna hit tab and then add my geo. This will add my geo with the input added on top in front of it and automatically connect it. I'm gonna do for my material, I'm gonna do a point sprite, drag that onto the geo as the material, and then I'm gonna add a camera, and then my render. Okay, and my render, I'm going to create it to be 1080 width, 1920 height. Okay, so now it's ready to start my instancing. So I'll go on the Geo and I'll go to my instance tab, turn that on. And then for my positions, sorry, for my translate of my positions, I'm going to drag in the POS and then use my red, green, and blue channels for those positions. So those look like they're coming in correctly. And then to set the colors for each particle, I'm going to use my video input or my video top in the second tab of instancing down here at color. And then I'm going to right click and view on this just so I can see what I'm making here. Okay, so and you can move this around, set your camera to wherever you want. Um, this is also where you can play around with the point scale in your point sprite to kind of fill in spaces. Maybe from here I would like, uh, animate the camera or something like that before I exported my video. And maybe I'll show that in a little bit when I get to sort of the pop side of things. Okay, so pretty simple process, just going from getting a depth image, a depth video, and converting it with the color to give me a point cloud that's colored correctly using tops and sops. Um, yeah, so I want to show this extra method here, mostly also just to illustrate how much better pops are going to be for this sort of method. Hopefully you learned something of just how tops work, even from watching this, but I know as pops kind of become the thing that are used in TouchDesigner, I'm hoping this will really illustrate how much faster and more efficient pops will be when you start to understand how they work. But first, let me show you how this sort of like stop multiplication thing works, so you can see sort of the efficiency gains we get. If you don't care about that part, you can kind of skip ahead, and I'll try to give you some good chapters to skip ahead. But let me actually, just so we make sure we still have this for people if they want to use that as a project. I'm going to put that in a base and I'm going to call it, point cloud um, tops. Okay, let's copy and paste that. And then I'm going to call this, instead of point cloud, I'm going to call this lines with stops. Okay, so let's go in here. We've still got our same stuff. I'm not going to be rendering. Let's close this too. I'm not going to be using this same point setup with sprites or anything. I am going to use the rest of these though. Oh, I'm going to turn off instancing because it's not going to be instancing. This is just copying stops. Okay, so just to show you how this works. So normally if I was going to do this with lines, I would bring in a single line. And to match the number of points, I'm going to reference my position operator. So I'm going to say op POS dot width. So that's going to be my number of points across the width of this. And then to make each number of lines that I want, I'm going to say copy. Let's bring it in there. I'm going to copy this based on the height. So op POS dot height. Okay, so that's 1920. So I've got 1080 here and 1920 here. So I've got 2 million points that I'm going to be creating here. And then in order to turn my pixels or my points that I have here for all my positions into connected lines, I need to convert first to chopped and then back to sops. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to say top to chop, and pay attention here to how like my performance goes. Right now, by default, this is only bringing in one row of my top. So first of all, I'm going to delete the alpha because I don't want that. It's just a bunch of extra processing I don't need. And then in the crop, I'm going to go from, instead of just taking one row, I want the full image. So right away, this is going to drop my frames to, I'm already down to 16. I'm going to turn the render on this off. That brings you back up so it doesn't bake or it doesn't cook until I bring in our next one here. And then I need to shuffle those back together so that they're all on single channel. So I'm going to sequence channels by name. That'll put me back into just RGB channels. We'll see. Again, back down to 16 frames when I have that on. I'm going to convert this to a null. And then let's call this points. And then I'm going to convert this back to sops, sop to sop. And it's giving me an error because it wants to have a scope of TXTYZV. I'm just going to change these to RGB. Okay, so now we've got our lines drawing. Zoom in here so you can see what's happening. So I've got my lines drawing. There's, 2 million points, obviously. Um, One of the things we're also getting here, though, right now is that every line is drawing to the end and then it's drawing a line back to the next line. So there's kind of zigzagging down the entire scene. The way to get rid of that, and the whole reason that I made this copy setup in the beginning, is because the input on a chop stop is there so that it knows when to create those line breaks. So I'm going to bring that in, and that I don't know if you can really tell, but like yeah, you can see it's less noisy looking because we're not drawing those lines back to the beginning. And then let's see what's next. So next I need to let's go ahead and get this at least rendering. So I'll bring this into a null and then into my geometry. Um, let's let's do a constant material on there again and take this to an out, right click and view it. Okay, so rendering with stops, and then I want to add my video back as a material. Um, One of the things, you might think that maybe, oh, I just drag this video on, but if you'll notice, that doesn't quite do what we want. The way I can fix that is right click or add in before my null at the end a um, texture stop, and that gives us our UV points kind of references back to where they are in space because I'm projecting from that Z axis just like the video itself is. So anyway, so okay, so we see this process here. I mean, we're down now. We're down to 7 frames. If I, turn everything off, even it is still just crawling. Um, but on the current version of TouchDesigner, this is like a method you can play with and pull this kind of style from. Maybe you don't actually want to bring the original video in as the color. Like maybe you want to like add some sort of like some like scan line sort of effect to it or something, and like change the color of the line to like something more neon looking or something. Which brings up another point too, that like we don't have to do the entire video, obviously. One thing I'm gonna add in here. So especially if I want to stylize the effect a little more, I can add a resolution on both videos because I want them to be the exact same sizes. Not on both. I'm going to go into my common tab of this first one and my output resolution. I'm going to drag it over to the other one and still drag it, grab it, and drop it on the second one here. That way, now anytime I change this top resolution, I can it's automatically on that second one. So we can get this cool scanline effect, and this is actually still running. This is running pretty efficiently here still. Um, we could even drop it further too if we go in there and maybe you can drop a second one in or do a custom resolution. Um, yeah, so that's how I do this in the current version of Touch Designer. And with the pops coming out soon, I want to show you through how I would do this sort of effect in pop world too. So give me a second, I'll be right back and I will show you how I do that. Okay, now we're back, and this time we're in the currently experimental version of Touch Designer. If you notice, 2025, the 30,060 version that has pops. So I'm going to show you kind of how to go through this same sort of process with pops, and you'll see it's exciting to see how much better this seems to work and how much faster you can do it if you know what you're doing. So I've got my 2 videos here. I'm going to make my same nulls. This one's sorry, and let's name those depth and video. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is convert these straight into pops. So in pops, I'm going to take it to top to pop, and uh, you'll see in the parameters here, my first RGBA input contains, and I want to change this to height actually. And then I want to add another top as a reference and add my video top and already you'll see the channel scope RGBA and it's set to color by default. So right now, if I hit A on this pop and I scroll around, you'll see sort of there's depth there and it's very, very flat. But that's because by default in this height tab, you'll notice the displacement scale is only at 0.1. So I'm going to change that to 1. And you'll see right there, I've already got a good visualization of my particles with color and everything in space. And from there, if I just want to take that out to render, I add my null here. I'm going to call this points, and then drag out while I'm dragging, hit tab, bring in my geometry to connect my geometry, add the regular rendering network things here of a camera and a constant dragged onto there to make it the material, and then a render. And for my resolution, 1080 by 1920 again. And already just there off the bat, I have, that point set up. And it already looks nicer and is running very performantly. I mean, it ran fine in the other version, but here let's add sorry, let's add some of the other things we did with the lines as well. So um, in my top two, I actually have this option almost automatically. So if I come in here and go to my details page, you'll see right now I'm just connecting point primitives, but I can change that to lines. And you'll see here in my pop preview, I'm already adding those lines in. And again, I mean, this is uh, like we'd seen before. I'm sorry, get this out of the way. I'm making this still has those same 2 million points. I'm still full 1080 by 1920 resolution, and this thing is not even scratching my, processor here, like because it's all running efficiently on the GPU. I'm not going swapping between chops and stops and everything else, but it's still getting these lines like I want it, right? Um, and that is coming through all the way actually to my render, so I can just use that as my my preview here. But so there's a couple extra things we can do with this too that make it that much easier. I'm going to change my camera size here to be closer to my output, so that way it's a closer estimate. Okay, so um, maybe I don't like the look of these lines, when they kind of get stretched back because I'm drawing them across. Well, first before I get down it, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited about these things. When I change it to lines, automatically it has lines in the X and Y direction actually. So I can actually just by turning these on and off, like this is giving me lines in the X direction. Um, so maybe we can see that difference by zoom in here a little more. So, these are drawing left to right, and then I can turn that off, turn on the vertical lines, and now you can see these are drawing vertically instead. So easy to just like swap between or have them both, ends up being more like a mesh with all the lines getting material on them. But maybe I don't like those lines stretched out so much. Maybe I want to actually see some space between these, but still render with lines. There's a great pop that they've added here called line breaks. By default, it's breaking every 3 points. I'm gonna turn that off and turn on this by distance threshold. And now, if I angle this a little bit, I can change this distance threshold down. And you can see as I go down, it like will break those lines apart based on how far apart they are. If I go all the way down, it breaks them, it turns them all off, obviously. But I can kind of get a stylized sort of effect if I want of these lines drawing between things, but not drawing too big of spaces. Um, anyway, makes it so much easier to get these kind of cool particle point cloud effects with only a couple simple things inside of my pop setup. Um, let's see what else. So maybe just to show a little extra of how I would get sort of a final product out of this to send to render. Um, you know, to show you a quick like camera animation that I would do, I would maybe make a noise chop, um, and let's make an X and Y channel, and I'm going to turn on time slice, and we'll pump up the period a little bit so it's slow, and then we're going to have this. Um, Rotate around the null. So the null by default will be on 0, 0. So if I look at my geometry here from the sides and think about these axes, so I want it to be at the 0, 0 point, and the camera's sitting out here somewhere. I'm like one one away from the middle, so the camera's out here in space somewhere, and I want it to rotate around that center point. Um, so I'm going to take the null and I'm going to parent it the parent of this camera. So now whenever I rotate this null, it'll rotate around that center point instead of rotating the camera on its axis. It's going to rotate the camera around the center point. So let's add this noise to this null rotation. So in the X direction, I want to rotate around the X coordinate. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter too much, but like I'm going to rotate around the X and Y axis. So I'm like floating around it. And then you'll notice you're not seeing a lot because it's only getting an amplitude of 1 degree of rotation. So I'm going to change this up to like let's go to 45. And bring my period down a little bit. And it's going to kind of start from wherever I had the camera in the first place. I can still move my camera around kind of in reference to that null. Um, and I didn't want to rotate around my Z also. Okay, another thing that I might do is that, maybe I want to keep my camera focused on a certain point. So, if I go back to my, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that on my camera. If I go back to my geometry, I might see like, okay, I want like he's kind of whenever he's skating here, like he's like, maybe halfway down the Z and like a little up on the Y. So let's set this null. I'm going to rename it to look at null. Look at null, and then I'm going to go ahead and set my camera to look at it. And then I'm going to move this to about zero point 0.5, maybe up or down a little bit. So that way, even the camera's rotating around the center point, but it's always going to sort of look at the same point on the screen. So it gives you a little more complex of a look. So yeah, I won't dive too much more into this, but just to give you that sort of idea of what's possible with one with these AI generated depth maps, and two with pops, and just the process of how to turn these things into point clouds and these sort of 3D depth strings or lines. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. If you want these project files, both versions, the current version, TouchDesigner, and this experimental version with the pops, I will make those available to my Patreon supporters. And definitely, if you like these videos, like and subscribe. I'm hoping to make a lot more tutorials this summer. And I would definitely love to hear anything that you're interested in learning about, whether it's in Pops or in the previous version. I'm still like digging into Pops and figuring out a lot of the potential of them. So if you have a challenge for me to figure out, I am definitely game for that. Also, I am a freelance touch designer developer. So if you have a project that you are interested in, getting some help with or hiring for, I'm definitely available if you find me through my contact information down below. Thank you so much, and I will see you at the next one.